My name is Tracy Hansen, and I'm with the Washington Center for Women in Business. Welcome today to Let's Talk Business. I'm really excited to have Jim Greenfield in the office with me today, talking about nonprofit, and in just a moment he will introduce himself. But let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This can absolutely be interactive, but we got a small group on here, so feel free to ask your questions anytime. However, since this is being recorded, I would love it if you would mute yourself in between asking questions, that sort of thing, just to kind of get down, decrease any noise interference. You can do that by clicking on either the green microphone button that it shows here or the green microphone next to your name. This is being recorded, so if you have to leave early for any reason or if you come on late, you'll get this in your inbox later today so that you can always listen to it again. Mute yourself like we talked about. If you're having trouble hearing us for any reason, I highly recommend the phone audio version versus computer speakers. However, if you're using your computer speakers and are having no trouble, no need to change. And then, like I said, this is completely interactive. We want to make sure that your questions are answered. We have two ways that we can get questions from you. You can either raise your hand, which is this icon here, and that will let us know that you just want to verbally or audibly ask your question. Make sure you unmute yourself when you do that. Or if you don't have audio or you'd rather, you can also just type into the chat box, and Jim and I will be able to see that. Are there any questions about housekeeping before we move on? Great. If that ever changes, just feel free to type in the chat box. So a little bit about the WCWB. We are funded in part by the U.S. Small Business Administration to help women who are starting businesses, or if they're in business, overcome different business hurdles, basically. You can see on the screen just some of the things that we cover. Building a nonprofit is not one of our main things. That's why we love having partners like Jim and SCORE, which he'll talk about in a moment, that we can partner together. And I see we have a question. Oh, my name is Tracy Hansen, and I'm with the Washington Center for Women in Business. Thanks for asking. Now, we can provide these business assistance through a variety of ways. We do workshops like this, either online or in person, or we do a lot of one-on-one business coaching. You would make an appointment with us, and we would, really dig down into your personal goals and how we can get you there. We do cover the state of Washington. The first-time meeting with us is free. After that, it's $25 for a 1-hour session, but we do have scholarships available. And you are welcome to reach out to me. There's my contact information. Christine Buckley is our business coach, or if you're in rural Thurston County, we have Cheryl Selby. And then with that, actually, I'm going to give the reins over to the star of the show. Let me just pull up his slides. Take it away, Jim.
Well, thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon. My background was as a fundraiser primarily in 3 colleges and universities and 5 hospitals. In the 5 hospitals, I started a new not-for-profit organization as a subsidiary hospital foundation. So I have some good experience with starting a nonprofit because it's the same no matter who you are. By the way, Tracy, most of the kinds of services that you offer, we do also through SCORE. And SCORE is basically a group of retired executives who volunteer their time to coach people who would like to start a business, or in my case, I help with starting a nonprofit. So to begin,
open the site.
Let me explain 2 things. One, today's session will be about the legal requirements to start a not-for-profit organization. And we're going to review these topics. But the second session on March 20th will be the financial side, primarily raising money. So today, with regard to legal requirements, to become a tax-exempt corporation, that's kind of a big step. What's tax exemption mean? Well, you don't pay income tax as an organization. You don't pay real estate tax if you own. Hello. And you pay some sales tax, but the most beneficial may be that contributions to a tax-exempt organization are tax deductible under the law. So we're going to look at tax exemption. We're going to look at incorporation and registration here in Washington, and you must do that first before you apply to the Internal Revenue Service for your federal tax exemption. The requirements for both include having a mission statement, and I want to also speak to the vision and values statement that you need to prepare. And then we're going to spend some time on the role of the board of directors. Whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, you will have directors. So there's several roles and duties and responsibilities to lead these organizations. And then we'll wrap up with a few other things, including the need for and the value of having plans going forward, a strategic plan, a long-range plan, whatever you choose to call it. I want to back up and give you a little sense of, there's a bit of history associated with legal standing for not-for-profit organizations. It goes back to, before time began, when the earth was still cooling. Our New and Old Testament advocates giving as an act of faith. And we will speak about the role of philanthropy throughout. But the laws began in 1601 in England, a statute of charitable uses, so that funds that were set aside for charitable purposes were protected under the law of the land. Beginning in this country, 1913, followed in 1917 and 18, we had congressional action to establish exempt status, and income tax laws would allow for deductions to be tax deductible, including estates. In more recent time, the Tax Reform Act in 1969 required distribution on the part of foundations with regard to their holding funds as assets to be distributed at a minimum imposed 5% distribution rule. We also received several plus items out of that Tax Reform Act of creating categories for estate gifts, charitable remainder unit trusts, annuities, etc. In 1985, we began changing some of the previous allowed regulations. The Reagan administration withdrew the charitable contribution deduction from non-itemizing taxpayers, using the standard deduction as its replacement. And you may recall that the most recent 2017 Tax Act actually raised the maximum allowed numbers of individuals, with doubling the personal exemption to what we estimate to be perhaps as much as 90 to 95% of all income tax preparation and filings. Has that affected fundraising, and has it affected public support since 1985? We can't believe that it has, because giving continues to go up. So just a little bit of background on the taxes. What is a tax-exempt organization involved? You must fit one of these 9 categories in application to the federal government: relieving the poor and the distressed, advancing religion, lessening the burdens of government. That's in there only because this is a government-exempt privilege and they are part of the business. Most people are involved in number 6, promoting health, social welfare, environmental conservancy, arts and patriotism, etc. So as you consider starting a not-for-profit, if that is where you are, you want to see whether or not the cause that you're going to represent fits under the law in the categories that are listed. And more importantly, you also have to be aware that you are asking to become a pure public charity. That's a little different. You must have, for example, a charitable purpose. You must render gratuitously a substantial number of the services you plan to offer. You have to also be able to identify a substantial and indefinite class of persons who are the legitimate objects of the charitable purpose. And of course, relieve government of some of its burden by providing these services otherwise the government might provide. And lastly, operate entirely free from private motive. Well, that's a pretty long list of things to consider, but that's the way the law is written. What is the size or scale of nonprofit organizations in America? Approximately 1.5 million. By the way, that's your competition as you get started. There are various classifications under the 501c code, 501c1 through 28. There's even a couple more. But area 501c3 is where the public charities reside in the greatest number. There's approximately 1 million organizations and private foundations that represent about 71% of all the 501c code entities. An interesting distinction under the law is that only certain of these sections are actually allowed for charitable contributions to be deductible. C3 is one, C8, C13. One of those is, for example, cemetery companies. I don't write this stuff, I just try to explain it. So these are the categories, but a little bit more about this is the application process. I mentioned the mission statement, and that's a very critical document that explains what is it that you intend to do. I like to use the example of the original Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and it goes as follows: to prevent drunk driving and care for its victims. I wasn't aware of the second half of that until I heard that. And the beauty of it is it says everything about who they are and what they do in 9 words. It's very clear. So think brevity, think clarity, and don't make it a paragraph.
And I'm just going to stop you 1 second. I see we have a question about accessing the PowerPoint. It was emailed to you guys earlier today, but I will absolutely be sending it out again as a follow-up. So yes, you will have access to these slides. Karen, I see your hand is raised. Is that the question you had? I think so. Yeah, okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Continue, Jim. Thank you.
All right, good question. The other things that you have to do, you actually have to have a document called Articles of Incorporation. You will need a set of draft bylaws. You will need to have an estimated budget and a fundraising plan. And also, you need to recruit your board of directors, a minimum of 3 individuals. That's specifically required when in the state of Washington you will file for charitable organization registration with the Secretary of State. And I've listed the actual websites to go to. And the first thing you need to do is get these documents ready and get your certification as a registered not-for-profit organization in the state of Washington before you can apply to the federal government, to IRS, for federal tax-exempt status. There are 2 forms, and they're much more detailed than in the state of Washington. It's IRS Form 1023, and the good news for startup organizations is the 1023EZ. It's just a little shorter and doesn't require as much detail, and that's probably appropriate for organizations that expect under $50,000 in revenue in the year they are applying. The consequence of IRS application is a tax determination letter, a very valuable letter that it certifies your exempt status, and it includes the EIN number, the exempt institution number. Oh my goodness, that's a lot of work, and that's going to take perhaps from start to finish up to 2 years. Once you have your state of Washington registration, you have approximately 24, 26 months to file with IRS. So those are the legal steps that are required. A little bit more about the scale and scope of nonprofit organizations in America. All of the 501c3, looking across the chart here to 2008, all of them represent the numbers of them. That's the 1.5 million. Those that are reporting, and that is to say those that have activity sufficient to require annual reporting, is approximately 600,000. See what their revenues are, their expenses, and their asset value. But notice the change over the 10-year period in the far right. This is a rapidly growing, the not-for-profit sector is a rapidly expanding part of America. In the 501c3 group, there's public charities listed at the top. How many of them are there as of 2008? That's the almost 1 million that are C3. The reporting entities, what is their total revenue, et cetera. You can see they're very healthy as well. And so this is a substantial business enterprise in America with these special privileges. But to break it out a little bit in terms of what are the sources of revenue available for not-for-profit organizations, there are fees for services. There are fees for services and goods from the government. For example, hospitals receive Medicare and Medi-Cal, I lived in California, Medicaid support for patient care. There also are several areas in the federal government and state governments, city governments, county governments, where direct government grants and contracts are part of the revenue base. And by the way, that I do not consider government grants to be philanthropy. That's a contractual relationship. Investment income, many not-for-profit organizations develop some reserves, some have endowment, and that produces revenue as well. And then private gifts and contributions, 10% of all the revenue source from gifts and contributions, and we'll explore that in detail in our second session.
So what you're saying is that primarily half of the money that you need to fund your nonprofit is going to be from fees from services that you are providing, services and goods. So it's not like you'll be 100% funded by a grant or something like that.
That's right. Many organizations actually provide their services with pretty minor fees a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. If you're a member of the YMCA, you have an annual membership fee. Lots of organizations have membership programs, specifically as a revenue base. Mm-hmm. The performing arts groups actually have ticket sales for attendance and participation. Very good, thank you. Now let's look a little at that 10%. How much money is given away to public charities every year? You would wonder, what is the amount of contributions? And then who receives these contributions? And there are several recipients, but first let's look at the source. We have 4 principal sources of charitable gifts and contributions. Individuals, as you see across there, between 14, 15, 16, and 17, it has been improving. They represent 72% of the total. Bequests, you have to prepare for those, and most of us are not necessarily scheduled to make our bequests known. But that's another 9%. Foundations, where you may have thought were most of the contributions, actually represent 16%. And corporations, who are in the business of making money, not giving money away, do have a charitable contribution program, and that represents 5%. Now back up to the figures, $286 billion given by American individuals in 2017. The total of all of these, 410 billions of dollars. We will have the 2018 data sometime around June. This is published by in the form of the annual Giving USA report, which has been a basic foundation for tracking giving for over 50 years. This suggests to you that your primary focus for developing revenue in the area of contributions will be from people. There are organizations called corporations and foundations, but they have very specific areas that they choose to support and prefer to support, and you have to qualify. And the qualification is based on what your mission statement says and what are the specific individuals or parts of the community that you are supporting. Now, where does all of this $410 billion go? Religion is the leader at 31%, followed by education at all categories of education, and then human services. That's 30 to 35% of all nonprofits, C3s, are in the human services area. And then gifts to foundations. Individuals are able to create individual personal foundations, give their funds to community foundations for distribution, or donor-advised funds. And that's a substantial area of charitable giving. So if you take those top four, that's almost 65% of all the money given away in America, and the rest of us are basically competing for the remaining 40%. So that's a little introduction. And if you're going to become an environmental organization or an animal rights organization, you are pretty far down the list in terms of public support presently, in terms of what people believe are the more critical items. And certainly we would all think these days that the environment does need some additional attention and therefore some support. All right, you can digest all of these figures on your own. Let's move on to getting back to that principal business of a mission statement. I think it's helpful if you can answer these rather critical questions. First of all, why do you exist? What is it that you are about? Why would anyone care for the cause you represent? So what is your cause? What do you do? If you have an explanation of what is the work that you are about, then you also can help us with understanding what you've done, what you've accomplished. You need to be able to demonstrate that you're doing good works for public benefit. Where are you going is your plan for the future that establishes an ongoing, continually engaged in public service entity, and that's what the money's for, where you're going further into the future. And we'll get to the planning requirement, which explains what's the money for in detail. So those items are rather important to think about. Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? How much of it have we actually accomplished in great detail? But more importantly, as we go forward, what is the specific plan and what's it going to cost to accomplish that for our organization to fulfill its mission? As you begin to think about those questions, think also about what you need to know about your area of service. For example, what is the extent, what is the area that you represent geographically, or what you hope to represent, whether it's a community, whether it's a specific group of individuals, whether it's a geographic area. What is the existing need that you can document, that you can find out? It's 30,000 people in the state, of which there are 2,000 right here in Thurston County. Who else is involved in serving that specific need? That would be organizations that are like the one you're going to start, or one where you might partner. What is the status that they have? What is their experience? What have they learned? How big are they? How many people are involved? They're a walking around example for you of what you're trying to become. And what is left in the sense of what is the extent of unmet needs that you attend to, plan to address, that will be your role, because of the 30,000 in the state and the 2,000 in this county, only 1,000 are being served, so you have to address the remaining 1,000. And lastly, understand what kind of support they are receiving. Where is that coming from? What is the sense that that's a reliable base that you could yourself in your new organization apply with some expectation that there are funds out there to support your cause? Very important to have a good understanding of exactly what the marketplace looks like. All right, here we are, a little bit of time now, a little bit of effort, a little bit of focus on this mysterious mission statement. Effective mission statement, indeed. A clear description of where an organization is headed in the future that sets it apart from others and makes a compelling case for the community or public to support the need it will address. A lot of words there, but basically, why do you exist? What is it that you intend to do? Identify that specific need. I also like to suggest it must be short, be memorable, and allow people to grasp the sense of it very quickly, so that individuals you will approach, individuals who you will engage with, board members, employees, various funding sources, volunteers, the people you're being served, will have a clear, concise understanding of exactly what your organization is all about. That's a homework assignment. Vision statement. A vision is actually all tied up in that plan for the future, but it can be a larger vision than just the immediate next year or two or three. What we're trying to do here is give people a sense of a larger horizon, a larger issue that needs to be addressed. You are in the business of addressing these specific circumstances right now over the next year, 2, 3, that's going to actually have impact on the overall need. By the word impact, you'll hear that when you hear people talk about funding nonprofits. They want to see results. They want to see that they've actually made a difference. I have examples here of rather far-reaching visions. No child in our city will go hungry to bed in the evening. Wow, that's pretty comprehensive. Here's another. In 2 decades, our services will no longer be needed. That's putting yourself out of business, but that's a very noble goal indeed. Or be recognized as the best symphony orchestra in America. Okay? However that's defined, but that's a goal. What is your goal? What is your goal to be in the future? Value statement is a bit of a combination of what you believe in and what kinds of organizational culture you will represent. It takes a while to sort out what are the values you believe in most deeply with regard to what your mission says you are about. And this is an example from a senior center, that these came out of their strategic planning process to respect for people as they age, understand and appreciate the dignity of older adults, understand that the role of the organization is to nourish the lives of their clients, customers, if you will, dedication to achieve optimal health through their services, and public trust that these are indeed valuable and worthy. The word passion appears here, and I want to add a note about that. Organizations and the people that they represent actually have, in the largest sense, a passion for the cause. They believe in the cause. They work for the cause as volunteers, or they contribute to it to move it forward. It's very much a part of it. This is not a business designed to make money for anyone. This is a passionate commitment to serve others and meet their needs. What's the money for? How do we establish that answer? And it comes beginning in the mission statement here in the center of the bullseye. And out of that mission statement, the organization has a plan for its immediate future. 3 years, 5 years, it wants to get somewhere. It has an objective that's out there in approximately 3 to 5 years. They want to be this big. They want to be serving this many people. They want to be in these communities. Then they break that down into a one-year plan, which has a budget, which has a series of objectives that they want to meet. And out of that comes, all right, now we know what the money's for, because we have defined it in the basis of our strategic objectives. And if we can do these things in this year, in our general development organizational plan, then year 2 will be possible. And so we move forward. And these are live plans in the sense that they move forward as well. And we make an annual plan every year with all the details in that individual plan for that year to keep it moving forward. That's what helps the public understand that we're not standing still. We're trying to grow our services. There are unmet needs yet to be addressed. So some more about some of these, what do you call them? A master plan, a long-range plan, strategic plan, must match up exactly with what the mission announced. This also becomes the vision. And that's where the passion comes forward. That's where people get excited about being part of making the vision happen, bringing the mission to life and moving forward, guided by the values of the organization. So to kind of wrap that around, the programs and services that are offered are basically this year's operational needs. Those are the specifics. The specific fiscal plan or budget is related directly to those programs and services and their defined objectives, and those become priorities of need, funding need, and the budget then identifies all sources of revenue, including what are the public support fundraising imperatives. It's a very complete story, start to finish, and that's what the organization's marketing, communications, program plans will discuss all year long, and it seeks the public's support. All right, let's turn our attention now to the very critical area of board leadership, roles of boards of directors. By the way, some organizations use the term board of trustees, a very good term to consider when you're forming an organization, because there is a trust responsibility that it goes with every board, whether it's a board of directors or board of trustees or board of regents. They are the individuals responsible to the public for the organization and all of its activities. And that begins with a faithful observance of the mission, vision, and values. But they also must provide leadership and leadership support to the overall organization, and they have the responsibility for oversight of all the programs and activities that go on. There are lots of management actions to fulfill the public trust, beginning simply with being legal at all times, having an accounting system, not only accounting for purposes of a financial audit, but accounting to the public for the use of the funds as public benefit entities. They also have the responsibility to hire and fire the CEO or executive director. The persons who are then employees report to the executive director, who has that similar role and responsibility. But as you can see, it's also important for organizations to actually have plans for the future that actually gives them a direction. It answers that vision question, and it helps the public understand what is the organization doing, but where is it going, because they want to invest in that organization's future to meet those needs that are in the community. And lastly, and it's not last because it's least important, it's equally important to be sure to take action as a board, as individuals, to ensure adequate fiscal resources at all times. And that includes, for many board members, an active role in the fundraising as well as financial oversight.
I actually have a question about that, about the hiring and evaluating the CEO or executive director. So for the people on the call that are going to be creating this nonprofit, what position do those people usually end up with? Are they the CEO? Are they on the board? How, I guess my question is, should they be concerned that they create this board that then gets rid of them if they're the CEO?
Let's first deal with several aspects of that. The individuals who want to start are initially the leaders of the organization. They seek friends, colleagues, family members, and professionals to assist them in bringing it to life and guiding it appropriately under the law. At some point, the board will decide as a group that we've reached a certain point, we need to have professional leadership. The individual who brought this whole idea forward may indeed end up being that CEO or executive director, or will step aside and turn it over to a professional in that field who, working with the board, will continue to move the organization forward. Now, the issue of whether the CEO is a board member or not is built into the bylaws structure. It's certainly legal to be so. It's not illegal to be so. So it is possible. It all depends on the organization, the group of people, etc. But the concept here is not firing executive directors. The idea is really evaluating through the executive director the whole organization's operations, etc. And they work together. The board is responsible as well. To make sure the organization continues to function successfully, legally, and financially.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that.
I see that's a point of some importance. Now, we can have a little discussion here, if you would like, to think about what are the kinds of specific qualifications that you're going to be looking for in recruiting board members to your new nonprofit organization. The other part of the question is, what are the qualifications that will be required for your current or your future board members beyond just the starting point? What is the kind of talent that you believe you're looking for or need to find?
Feel free to type into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and speak aloud. I think I actually muted you, Karen. I'll unmute you just in case. Quiet group today.
That's all right. It's a big question. But
it is.
I'm going to provide a little information about qualifications, but I want to do at this point, since we've been moving through this agenda, to begin to think about what kind of talent, what kind of support. Friends and family, yes, they're helpful, but is one of them an accountant or a business, a financial person? Do any of them have prior experience in nonprofit work at board level or committee level? Do you have someone who has a CPA background who can assist you with appropriate financial record keeping? Things of that sort. And then, given the cause itself, what kind of expertise in the subject matter of what the cause is about? If it's going to be taking care of animals, do you have a vet as a member of the board to help everyone understand what are the specific professional requirements in the care of animals? So, lots of things of that sort. Build some talent around you going forward. Here's some specific kinds of things with regard to the business end of a nonprofit, the ability to attract and supervise fiscal resources. Why is fiscal so important? Well, when you take a look at the IRS application, you will see the numbers of areas of finance that are requested. And then you are required annually to report both to the state and IRS on your overall activities, and about 75% of that is fiscal information. You need to have a professional audit, a CPA supervised audit every year to be submitted, a copy of that to be submitted to IRS and the state. So it is a very important area. Again, the public trust and what did you do with my money is very important. Understanding that nonprofits are a little bit different than a for-profit. A for-profit, basically the people who own it tell everybody else how to run it. In the area of a nonprofit, you actually have people responsible for certain levels of activity, but we function by consensus. We build teams of people around the cause, and we engage people in helping us to carry out our mission. Some ability in planning, including financial planning, budgets, some ability, some understanding of what it is that are the programs and services and how do we manage these programs and benefits delivered to the public. And how well are we doing that? If it's a food bank and our delivery system is basically limited to 2 trucks moving around the community, well, clearly, one of the things we're going to need is not only good maintenance on those vehicles and employees who are the drivers, but we're not able to serve our community's need adequately until we get the 3rd truck and we can cover another part of the community, because there's a definite need there. Performance evaluation is both program performance, service performance, and employee performance. And by the way, employees are subject to all of the same human resources, regulations, labor laws, etc., as every other for-profit organization. And understanding, lastly here, that there are ethical issues, there are professional practices to be observed, and we should understand what they are and follow them with regard to our program and services. Some of the times, some organizations require, for example, certified or accredited individuals as our employees. My experience in hospitals is that we had to have licensed physicians and licensed nurses, as well as other professionals, to carry out the work. And that was part of our ethical and professional practices. Public trust. Public trust. There is an area here that in the business end of day-to-day business we sometimes lose a little track of, but it has to do with what is the sense of the public that you're going to be engaged with as the clients, as well as the community that you're going to invite to assist you financially and with volunteer time, so that you're able to carry out the kinds of things that you do with complete understanding on the part of all of us that are involved as to we're doing the right things as best we can. So you see a list of elements there, and at the bottom I made the point, there is really no substitute for observing the highest standards of conduct in every area, because the public's trust and confidence is what enables us to exist and to thrive. And so those elements are very important to understand. So another discussion topics, let's say you're currently a board member and you're going to go to a meeting tomorrow. What are the kinds of things that we've discussed so far that you believe might be important to share with others at that board meeting? Do any of you have some thoughts about, what have we learned that I sure would like to share with my colleagues or friends at another organization? Well, it's an important point to think about in terms of building your organization as to the kinds of services, requirements, and obligations that are involved. And when you begin to reach out to friends, family, professionals, you want to be able to explain to them what are the kinds of things that we're asking you to undertake. This is a responsibility. Bylaws usually require a term of office of 2 years or 3 years, and then a repeat possibility, another term, and then you must go off and let someone else take your place, or it can be set up that there is no term of office whatsoever, which some people, in considering a board position, don't look at it as a life sentence. They look at it as an opportunity to help you for a while, and you become their philanthropic priority for a period of time of the term of office. So a little bit of review here. We've gone through our prepared text. We spent time on tax-exempt status and the incorporation registration requirements. Spent, I hope, a good amount of time on the role of the mission and vision and value statements and how they pepper all of the organization's conduct. Perhaps not enough on board leadership, roles, duties, and responsibilities. There's a lot of public information available about that, but it's important to understand it's a real job. And boards generally are not paid. This is a volunteer position, just like all the other volunteers. The employees are paid, but the rest of us that are helping out are volunteers. And we work for free. We also work for fun because we enjoy doing this and serving the organization. And yes, we work for food. We have meetings and we have a little nourishment to assist us in our carrying out of things. And then the value of having plans and understanding. It's a very careful, plotted, programmed direction for the future that invites the public to join us, to invest with us in fulfilling the mission. So there is our session. Any discussion?
That was great. Just while people are typing in your any questions for Jim or comments, thank you. That was a bunch of information, and your anecdotes to go along with it were great. And let's see. Oh, and Karen says this is so helpful put into spoken word. I agree, Karen. Rachel says, thank you. She appreciates it, and very well done. Thanks, Rachel. Glad to have you here this week.
Hope to see you in 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah, we'll be back. I believe some of you are already registered for the March 20th. If not, I will be sending the link via email today. Or you could also just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that you're registered. No problem. Karen said, absolutely eye-opening. I agree. You know, and I work in a nonprofit. That's where I am. And, you know, I see a lot of this from our perspective, but, you know, I wasn't here during the creation. And so a lot of it's, oh, that's why that is the way that it is. So that's great. I'll be registered. Great. We'll see you in 2 weeks, Karen. Yeah, it'll be noon, just like that, just like this one. If you have any colleagues that you wanted to join, that would be absolutely great. They can listen to the recording of this one to prepare for the March 20th event.
There's our subject matter for 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. And do you have your contact information on the slide or because one thing that you Jim mentioned was that he is with the SCORE program, so you can actually make an appointment with Jim and SCORE as well. You know, whether or not you're going to continue to see the Women's Business Center. And if you are not located locally to the South Puget Sound area here, Now, are there other, yeah, so he said that he could definitely do it by phone call. So there is SCORE mentors all over the country, but if you wanted to talk to Jim, he is absolutely available via phone. And I will make sure that you actually call our office and you can schedule with the Women's Business Center or SCORE or Jim. I'll make sure that you guys get all of that information in case you want to really step this up and get your nonprofit started. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, but if you think of anything later, the SCORE website does connect you locally. Yes, if you are just looking for any SCORE mentor, you can go to score.org and it will find you somebody who is local. I don't know if it lists the specific, it does nonprofit and that sort of thing.
If you go to tacoma.score.org, tacoma.score.org, that brings you to the local chapter, which includes where we are here.
Yes. Yeah, technically the Lacey is the Tacoma South Sound chapter. Yes. But yeah, so we'll see you in 2 weeks. Next week we will be talking about just starting a business in general. So you're welcome to join us that week if you have any interest in a for-profit business startup. If not, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And feel free to send your questions either via email or telephone our way in the meantime. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We know it takes a lot and we appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.